Krysten Sinema is at the center of it all. Some Arizonans wish she weren't. Let's see, this is, what date is this? The centrist senator is key to President Biden's agenda in Washington. Her positions have angered some Democrats back home. And there she is right there. And this is September 29, which is today. Today is Wednesday, 2021. Updated at 5:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Phoenix. Jade Duran once spent her weekends knocking on doors to campaign for Senator Krysten Sinema, the stubbornly centrist Democrat whose vote could seal the fate of a vast Democratic effort to remake America's social safety net. But no more. When Ms. Sinema famously gave a thumbs down to a $15 minimum wage and refused to eliminate the filibuster to pass new voting rights laws this year, Ms. Duran, a Democrat and biomedical engineer from Phoenix, decided she was fed up. She joined dozens of liberal voters and civil rights activists in a rolling series of protests outside Ms. Sinema's Phoenix office, which have been taking place since the summer. Nearly 50 people have been arrested. Now let me just stop here because Ms. Sinema, from what I heard, grew up poor. She came from a poor family, so this is not like somebody who came from a well-to-do family. So you come from a poor family, you can understand that $15 working in a fast food joint can really improve your life. You know, probably pull your family out of poverty and you won't have to rely on food stamps. But let me get back to the article. It really feels like she doesn't care about her voters, said Ms. Duran, 33, who was arrested in July at a protest. I will never vote for her again. Ms. Sinema, a one-time school social worker. And those people, by the way, they don't get paid that much, social workers. Nope. So you can understand. They should understand what it's like to be poor, working with people who are poor. And Green Party aligned activists. So she was Green Party aligned. Those are people who care about conservation, about the climate, and so far she's against the current bill that will improve our climate. You know, like Arizona, for example, very dry state, problems with water. So you would think somebody like her would jump on board to improve the climate so that they can have enough water in Arizona. But oh no. Vaulted through the ranks of Arizona politics by running as a zealous bipartisan willing to break with her fellow Democrats. She counts John McCain, the Republican senator who died in 2018, as a hero. Yeah, but remember John McCain was the one senator who stopped the Republicans from taking away the health care, the ACA, from people. So, you know, that's really important to note. So he didn't join the rest of the Republicans. He broke away, and he gave the thumbs down. And I remember the Senate leader McCollum, he was looking at him like he's crazy. You know, he gave the thumbs down. If John McCain had voted yes, then there would have been no ACA right now that would be helping millions of people. So she has to think about that, you know. So she counts John McCain, the Republican senator who died in 2018, as a hero. Yeah, he was a hero in more than one way, not just fighting in Vietnam, but also look at what he did with the health care. He upheld it. He didn't vote to take it away, and that takes a lot of guts. And has found support from independent voters and moderate suburban women in a state where Maverick is practically its own party. But now Ms. Sinema is facing a growing political revolt at home from the voters who once counted themselves among her most devoted supporters. Many of the state's most fervent Democrats now see her as an obstructionist whose refusal to sign on to a major social policy and climate change bill has helped imperil the party's agenda. Little can proceed without the approval of Ms. Sinema, one of two marquee Democratic moderates in an evenly divided Senate. While she has balked at the $3.5 trillion price tag and some of the tax-raising provisions of the bill, which is opposed by all Republicans in Congress, Democrats in Washington and back home in Arizona have grown exasperated. So there's a lady here. Let's see who she is. This is Casey Close, 29, once campaigned for Miss Sinema, but demonstrated outside her offices this summer with the Sunrise Movement, a youth-led group focused on climate change. While the Senate Democrats' other high-profile holdout, Joe Manchin III of West Virginia, has publicly outlined his concerns with key elements of the Democratic agenda in statements to swarms of reporters, Ms. Sinema has been far more enigmatic. That means she's more like a puzzle, like an enigma, and has largely declined to issue public comments. That's not good. You politician, you're supposed to be issuing public comments on something, serious like this. Let the people know where you stand. You don't just say, "Oh, I'm going to remain silent." That's not how it works. If you're a politician, that's not doing the work of the people. Whether they agree with you or not, at least you owe the people, to say, to be on TV, to get out in public instead of being quiet. Mr. Biden, White House officials, and Democrats have beseeched the two senators to publicly issue a price tag and key positions of the legislation that they could accept. But there's little indication that Ms. Sinema has been willing to offer that, even privately, to the administration. On Wednesday afternoon, that's today, she and a team from the White House huddled in her office for more than 2 hours on another day of what a spokesman for Ms. Sinema called good faith negotiations. Krysten has always promised Arizonans she would be an independent voice for the state, not for other political party. Yeah, but she's a Democrat. Look at how the Republicans are holding together. They don't think like that about an independent voice. Not one of them is willing to cross over like John McCain did, because John McCain understood the importance of health care. A man who was sick with a brain tumor, he realized that he was lucky. He had medical insurance. What about the average guy in Arizona who didn't have insurance? If he has a brain tumor, what will happen to him if he has a family? So John McCain understood that. That's one of the reasons he voted it down. They was trying to strip away health insurance from people who needed it. So John LaBombard, a spokesman for the senator, who wrote in an email responding to questions for the senator about her standing at home. She's delivered on that promise and has always been honest about where she stands. Oh, really? That posture helped her win election to the Senate in 2018 from a state whose voters are roughly 35% Republican, 32% Democratic, and 33% other. So, so Arizona, based on this, Arizona is not really a red state as we believe it is. 35% Republican, 32% Democrat, and usually it's the older people that would tend to be more Republican, because younger people in the age of the internet, in the age of where they can travel freely, their mind is more free to be accepting than older folks are. And for all the passions of the moment, Miss Sinema is not up for election until 2024. A breakthrough on the legislation could quell much of the criticism and burnish Ms. Sinema's image as a deal maker who shepherded a related bipartisan infrastructure bill through the Senate. But liberals in Capitol Hill do not trust that she's actually willing to support the broader spending package. And these people say here, and the filibuster is sitting outside Senator Sinema's Phoenix office in June to demand an end to the filibuster. So they were outside her office in June. Now, if you ever been, I've never been to Phoenix, but I've been to Arizona, to the Grand Canyon. It's hot like hell out there. So imagine, in the month of June, sitting outside her office protesting. You can imagine how hot that is. This discussion has been going on for months. 4 months. Senator Bernie Sanders, the Vermont independent in charge of the Senate Budget Committee, said in an interview. He added, "We need some definitive results." Democrats familiar with the discussions with Ms. Sinema and her staff say she has deep concerns with the current proposals around certain tax increases, which could shape the scope of the package. Yeah, a woman who grew up poor, who was a social worker, has concern about tax increases on the rich. Isn't that something? Now that's a really rich comment, pardon the pun. But seriously, people who go into social work are not going to, they know they're not going to get rich, because you look at the salaries for social workers, and you need like a master's degree. After you pay for a master's degree, you owe a lot of money. You're not really making a lot of money. So those kind of people, usually you want to trust them because they're not into it for the money. But this woman here she's worrying about the rich, who has a lot of money, who have different houses they can go sleep in, depending on the season of the year. In the closely divided Phoenix suburbs that were crucial to Democrats' recent win in Arizona, some exhausted voters said they were deliberately tuning out the fractious negotiations in Washington and the threats of a government shutdown. But others said they had been calling and writing Ms. Sinema for months, and now worried that the Democrats' best chance to advance major policies was slipping away because of their senator. Over the weekend, the state's Democratic Party threatened a symbolic vote of no confidence against Ms. Sinema. Dissatisfied donors and activists are starting a primary Sinema Political Action Committee to raise money to fund primary challenges in 2024 if she blocks the Democratic agenda in Washington. At the same time, House Democrats are now threatening to derail the trillion-dollar bipartisan infrastructure bill hammered out by Ms. Sinema that has already passed the Senate. The turmoil is not just testing Ms. Sinema's strategy of staying in the middle lane, but also Arizona's changing political trajectory. Democratic activists believe that Ms. Sinema's political future and Arizona's lies in the growing number of left-leaning Latino and young voters in the Phoenix and the fast-growing cities of surrounding Maricopa County, home to about 60% of Arizona's 7.3 million residents. They point to some surveys showing support for Democratic proposals to expand Medicare, provide more child care, or expand tax cuts to working class people, all of which is in that bill that she's holding up right now. But while President Biden did become the first Democrat in 25 years to win Arizona, his margin was a thin 10,500 votes, and Arizona's governorship and state legislature are still controlled by Republicans. And the reason for that is because a lot of people don't vote. That's why, you know. But if they were really serious and you had these left-leaning Latinos and like 60% reside in Maricopa County, you know, then of course, more than likely, Arizona, they can have like a Democratic, they did have a Democratic governor before. What's her name? That lady was Homeland Security Secretary under President Obama. She was from Arizona. And she was a Democrat. So yeah. So when they're ready, they could vote Democrat. And Arizona's governorship and state legislature is still controlled by Republicans. That's because they choose to. She's a Democratic senator elected in a center-right state, said Kurt Adams, a former Republican Speaker of the Arizona House. She's purposely tapping into that independent streak that a large section of Arizona voters have always had. Ms. Sinema's standing with Democrats has suffered as she takes fire for defending the Senate filibuster as a guardrail of democracy. By the way, the filibuster is not in the Constitution, so it's not really a guardrail of democracy. And it's argued in the Federalist Papers by Alexander Hamilton. And what's the other guy's name? Alexander Hamilton. And the other guy who at the time wrote the Federalist Papers. And they saw the danger of the filibuster. I believe Alexander Hamilton called it poison. And they were against it. Because before you had the United States Congress, you had like a provisional type government, the Congress that came before. So they were able to use this filibuster, came up with that, and they saw how it wasn't working. So that's why they know the dangers of a filibuster. Yeah. So yeah, that was Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. Those were the ones who wrote the Federalist Papers. And they both agreed that the filibuster, that it should be a simple majority. That's how they looked at it. If you're going to vote, it should be a simple majority. But some people argue that, well, you know, you need the filibuster to give the minority access. But the thing is, they do have access because each state has 2 senators, you know. So let's let's take a state like California with about 50 million people, and a state like Delaware. I don't even think they got 1 million people in Delaware, where Biden is from. They both have two senators. you know, they both have two senators. Or Rhode Island, that's another small state. They both have two senators. So how can you compare a state like California with about 50 million people and a state like Rhode Island with like less than 1 million people, and they do have they each have two senators, and this was one of the arguments that they had, going into writing the Constitution. They say, well, that's not really fair, and I think they did mention Delaware at the time. I think they mentioned because at the time when they wrote the Constitution, California didn't exist as a state. It wasn't a state, you know. Nope, they didn't reach that far out west. So they were talking about like Delaware. They mentioned Delaware, and I believe they mentioned probably Pennsylvania. And they said, well, that's not really fair. But they had to compromise. That's why they came up with two senators. But anyway, getting back to this, about 56% of Democrats in the state viewed Miss Sinema favorably, compared with 80% for Senator Mark Kelly, a fellow Democrat, according to a September poll from OH Predictive Insights, a Phoenix political research firm. In the sprawling valley east of Phoenix, Orgy Gastelum, an independent voter who once considered Miss Sinema too liberal, said he believed in her positions on bipartisan cooperation. He worried that scrapping the filibuster would provoke an arms race of increasingly extreme laws and further tear apart a divided country. Let me just stop here. I remember the filibuster because I'm old enough. Growing up, they never really used the filibuster that much. It's only since Mitch McConnell became Senate leader when when his party, Republicans, were in charge. That's when you hear a lot about the filibuster, but most Americans never really heard about the filibuster. But in my days growing up, when I went to school, when I went to junior high, when I went to high school, you don't really hear about it that much. The only time it was in the news a lot was back then, and I was very young then, during the time when Johnson administration, when he was trying to pass civil rights laws, like to end segregation, Voting Rights Act, and the party that was doing the filibustering was the Democrats, because the Democrats today are like how the Democrats of yesterday were like the Republicans today. And the Democrats were the one who were doing the filibustering, like the Democrats from the South. Other than that, moving forward, like during the years of like Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, you don't really hear about filibustering. Nobody was filibustering. People came to like agreements, gentlemen agreements. So there was no real need to be using the filibuster. But McConnell became a master of the filibuster. I mean, just look how during when Obama was in office, and one of the justices died. I believe it was Scalia. Okay, and it was an election year, and he held up the confirmation of Merrick Garland. Okay, he said during an election year, we shouldn't confirm a United States justice to the Supreme Court. Okay, he said that's how the rules should be. There's nothing written like that, but he made it up. Okay, so he got away with that, and he waited and waited. He waited a whole year without having anybody in the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court was like 8 instead of 9. And he went a whole year and he didn't give a damn. All right. So when Trump was elected, all of a sudden, he got in this new justice. The funny thing happened to show people how immoral the man is. When Ruth Ginsburg died in she died in 20 yeah, she died last year. 2020, late last year too. She died. And it was an election year, but he didn't go along with the same rules that he had. He decided he's going to break his own rules, and he rushed through a Senate confirmation right near the end of the year. You see, instead of waiting for the new president, because he said, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do that during the election year. Let the new incumbent president submit someone to be Supreme Court justice. So once he's realized, well, okay, Biden won. He rushed through this woman, and she became the last justice there. Barrett, I think her last name is. Yeah. So politics is really, really dirty. It's a dirty sport. So when all these people like Sinema and Joe Manchin think, oh, we're playing fair and we want to give Republicans a say, they're in the minority party, they don't think that way. Okay? They don't think that way. Because I just gave an example here of why they don't think that way. Because they were able to sneak in 2 justices. They held up the court for over a year. Merrick Garland couldn't be heard, right? He didn't get his chance. He should have been sitting on the Supreme Court. Okay? So they bypassed him. And then when Ruth Ginsburg died, in an election year, I guess there's a God, and he made it look to show how hypocritical these Republicans are. She died in an election year. Instead of following, like a moral person would say, you know what? This is what I say, let me go along with it because I'll be ashamed of myself, or it will show that I'm immoral. No, they don't care. They went along and they pushed through her nomination and they confirmed her to the Supreme Court. So people like Sinema and Manchin who think, we need to give these people a chance, or the filibuster. Look, man, you're fooling yourself. That's what it comes down to. You're fooling yourself, or you either smoking crack, one or the other. Okay, so getting back to this, but his support for incremental change is now being strained because he longs to see immigration reform. Why is that? Mr. Gasto 40, who is from Mexico, became a citizen last year after decades of living undocumented. Okay, so here's a guy who is from Mexico. He lived in the United States as an undocumented alien for many years. He had no rights under the Constitution to vote or anything like that. And he became lucky. He found a pathway to citizenship. And by the way, he should know that, the dreamers or what have you, those people who came here as kids, grew up here, right now, they don't have any pathway, right? So this is about the only thing that he sees that he sees about her that she should be able to do, She should be able to make a change because He must know how it felt because he's only 40 years old, which is young. So he spent most of his life in the United States as undocumented, especially in Arizona, with Joe Arpaio, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who could have picked him up and locked him up and have him be deported back to Mexico. That's not a nice thought, I'm sure. And there he is right there in the picture. So there's a part of me that says blow it up and get it taken care of, he said. But the long-term consequences could be so devastating. Not really. While left-wing Democrats may be frustrated with Mr. Manchin, he has not faced nearly the same level of backlash at home in his Trump-supporting state of West Virginia, where he served as governor and has been a political fixture for decades. But in Phoenix, Miss Sinema's office building overlooking the crags of Piestewa Peak in the affluent Biltmore neighborhood has become a magnet for her frustrated supporters. On some days, people crowd the building pushing Miss Sinema to support voter rights for laws and immigration reform. Other days, student-led groups arrive with banners telling her to do more to curb fossil fuel emissions and climate change. Yeah, that should matter much, right? In a state like Arizona that's so dry that you're lucky if you see it raining there. They criticize her for holding a fundraiser with business lobbying groups that oppose tax hikes in the Democrats' main spending bill. Many of the youngest activists now agitating the loudest against Ms. Sinema said they felt betrayed because she seemed so much like them. At 45, she's practically a teenager by the Senate's octogenarian standards. She is an Ironman triathlete, the first openly bisexual member of Congress, and as someone who claims no religion was sworn in on the Constitution rather than a Bible. I believe in what it would mean to have a queer representative who believed in the climate crisis, said Casey Close, 29, who has demonstrated outside Ms. Sinema's office with the Sunrise Movement, a youth-led group focused on climate change. I knocked on doors for her. I was an intern for her campaign. I really believed. Mary Kay Yering, a lifelong Democrat who lives in Scottsdale, said she and her wife were frustrated because they believed that Ms. Sinema had not done enough to change politics affecting abortion rights, voter rights, and, above all, climate change. Ms. Yering worried that a fast-warming climate could soon dry up the Lake Powell and Lake Mead reservoirs that water the West, which would make the state nearly uninhabitable in the summers to come. She said the environmental catastrophes facing the country were too dire for a cautious, incremental approach. Her vote matters so much, Ms. Yering said. She seems like a Republican in Democrats' clothing. While most conservatives broadly disapprove of both of Arizona's Democratic senators, Ms. Sinema's stubborn centrism has bought her some Republican support. Older voters, rural Arizonans, and voters who watch Fox News approve of Ms. Sinema, of course. Voters who watch Fox News approve of Ms. Sinema in a recent public poll, while also showing they did not favor her Democratic colleague, Senator Kelly. That's Mark Kelly. Ms. Sinema's defense of the filibuster brought grumbles of approval one recent afternoon from the conservative members of the Rusty Nuts Classic Car Club, who were gathered around a table at the American Legion Hall in Chandler, a Phoenix suburb, where many voters split their ballots in 2018 to vote for Ms. Sinema for Senate and Doug Ducey, a conservative Republican, for governor. I appreciate that she's not way left-leaning like the rest of them, said Pat Odell, a retired court clerk and conservative. Ms. Odell said she wanted to see a total closure of the southwestern border and wanted Ms. Sinema to reject the $3.5 trillion Democratic social spending bill outright. But even if that happened, would Ms. Odell actually vote for Ms. Sinema or anyone with a D beside their name? Probably not, she said.